3-month campaign and she was supposed to introduce herself to the American people. No wonder people were Googling, did Joe Biden drop out? And so...
No. No. You're saying 3 months wasn't long enough? It was too long.
It seems that some people are still struggling to accept Kamala Harris's defeat in last year's election.
It's not like we don't know. In Britain, for instance, when you have a short election, it's not like you don't know who the leader of the party is for months and years before that.
But you're either the person who's Googling the day before, did Biden drop out, or you know in a week. You know, did anyone in this audience not know enough about Kamala Harris pretty much after a week?
It's been 8 months, and believe it or not, some people are still pointing fingers at everyone except Kamala for the loss. But BillMaher isn't buying it. He insists Kamala deserves her share of the blame, and he made that perfectly clear when a few diehard Democrats tried defending her on his show. As always, don't forget to subscribe and turn on notifications. Let's dive in.
Everything the candidates, especially the Democrats, do to get voters annoys them. The constant texting. Did you get the texts like from Tim Walz every 5 minutes, and like always begging for money and knocking on doors? We've got people knocking on doors. People don't want knocking on your door. Who in this day and age wants someone knocking on? Kids don't even like it when a phone call. That's like too much of a invasion of their privacy.
BillMaher set the stage perfectly by laying out all the reasons voters found Kamala Harris so unlikable. And honestly, he wasn't wrong. Each point he raised was alienating, off-putting, and practically tailor-made to drive away the average voter. All Democrats really needed was a clear, coherent message and the confidence that the American people would respond. Simple enough, right? But instead, they had no real message at all. They spent most of their time catering to the woke crowd, and when that strategy inevitably backfired, they didn't shift to common sense. Instead, they doubled down with gimmicks, guilt trips, and the usual voter manipulation, because why earn support when you can manufacture it? Classic.
Trump hasn't done anything yet, but I understand the.
This was the problem. You know, there was a 2014 study that showed that Fortune 500 companies were more likely to pick a female CEO if the company was struggling, basically setting women up for the big job, but to also fail. If they did well, fine. But if they failed, like, look, we have a female CEO while failing. And that's what I feel like they did to Kamala Harris. When Biden refused to step aside and not run again, he was supposed to be that bridge. He backed off on that promise due to arrogance. And then he drops out after a catastrophic debate performance, and they set Kamala Harris up to fail.
If you've been following this channel for a while, you know wild takes from the left are nothing new. But this one deserves an award. Sarah Isgur actually talked as if Kamala Harris had been plucked out of nowhere to replace Joe Biden, like she hadn't just spent 4 years as vice president. 4 long, very public, very visible years. The mental gymnastics required to spin that narrative are Olympic level. But hey, the left never misses a chance to defend their own with a little revisionist storytelling. The reality? Kamala had plenty of time to win people over. Spoiler, she didn't. And to his credit, Maher didn't let that nonsense slide. He called out Isgur's delusion right to her face, no filter, no sugarcoating. Because at some point, someone has to say it. Voters didn't forget Kamala. They rejected her.
No. You're saying 3 months wasn't long enough? It was too long.
It was long enough.
It was long enough.
If they had a primary...
It's not that they didn't have time to introduce. They met someone and didn't like them.
If they had a primary, they wouldn't have picked her. And if they had, she would have been able to rough out those edges that then she basically has to start from scratch with a campaign team she didn't hire that didn't like her, right? It was his team. And so I wonder if that next Democratic person, maybe someone's not even on our radar yet. Because frankly, when you look at the history of who's, there's 2 types. The one who waited in line, who was next in line, and then there's the one who comes out. That's Obama, that's Clinton, that's Reagan to some extent.
Sarah Isgur is still clinging to the tired storyline that Kamala Harris was set up to fail, painting her as some kind of political martyr. In her version, Democrats knew Biden's campaign was doomed. So rather than let another old white man take the fall, they threw Kamala under the bus. How noble! But let's be real, the only thing Kamala was set up for was endless media praise and softball interviews. If anything, she had one of the smoothest, most protected political runways imaginable. Harris arguably had the best shot at beating Trump compared to other leading Democrats at the time. The problem wasn't her identity, it was her party's fixation on turning every issue into a woke talking point. Democrats didn't empower Kamala, they weighed her down with tone-deaf pandering. In the end, it wasn't sabotage that sank her chances. It was the message, or more accurately, the absence of one.
I'm going to side with Sarah about this one thing. If you're the sitting vice president for a president who has, throughout his entire term in office, been sitting at about somewhere between a 35 and 40% approval rating. People view the Biden administration as a failure. We can have a long discussion about whether they are right about that, about the economy, but the perceptions of the economy were that people thought inflation was too high, people thought we were on the wrong track, 75% wrong track numbers, and this huge inflation overhang. You're the sitting vice president, and you get put on elevated to the top of the ticket 107 days ahead of the election. I think that is a very high degree of difficulty put on anybody, and I do not think she is the perfect candidate. I tend to agree with Sarah that probably in a fully litigated primary, she probably would not have been the Democratic nominee, but we'll never know that.
And just when you thought the excuse machine couldn't churn out anything more absurd, John Hillman jumped in to back up Sarah Ischer with full-on damage control. Suddenly, the same guy who spent years parroting the Bidenomics is booming mantra is now admitting the economy was a mess. Oh, now it's a problem? This from the crowd that swore up and down on CNN and MSNBC that Biden had rescued America from Trump's economic ruins, that inflation was transitory, gas prices were fine, and skyrocketing grocery bills were just a perception issue. Fast forward to today, and Hillman wants us to believe Biden's disastrous economic record made it impossible for Kamala Harris to campaign effectively. Please, even BillMaher couldn't stomach it. He looked downright furious as Hillman and Ischer twisted themselves into knots trying to excuse Harris's failure.
Never been anybody who's had the difficulty of that situation, elevated that late in the campaign.
Why? Democrat would have needed to run away from
Bill, I don't know if you know this, but the vice president of the United States is basically shoved in a broom closet for 3.5 years.
I know.
Like, you couldn't.
She was more popular in there.
Yes, well.
I mean, this idea that in a mass media age, that 107 days is not long enough to know somebody?
You are way overestimating the American people in terms of what their ability. No. You have someone like Donald Trump has become a universally known, understood, loved by some, hated by others over the course of being omnipresent for 8 years.
Okay.
Barack Obama becomes president of the United States after running for 2 years as president, runs a 50-state primary, is on television, does dozens of Democratic debates.
Now hold on. BillMaher's about to weigh in, but before he does, let's clear something up. Kamala Harris wasn't shoved into some forgotten broom closet, no matter what her defenders want you to believe. She was handed real responsibilities. Big ones. Remember the border crisis? That was on her watch, and she completely botched it. Millions of undocumented migrants crossed into the U.S. while she smiled, waved, and avoided the actual border for as long as possible. And it doesn't stop there. She was handed golden opportunities to connect with the public, like an invite to the Joe Rogan podcast, and turn them down. Apparently, tough questions weren't on her schedule. The few interviews she did take, a disaster of word salads, nervous laughter, and zero substance. So no, Kamala wasn't sidelined. She had the spotlight, and she choked. That's why she never connected with voters.
You ever watched this show? But I had Michael Douglas on this week.
Yeah.
At the top, we were talking about this, and he made a very good point that every other country in the world can do it in months, sometimes weeks. Why can every other country do it in that short a period of time? Are they all so much brighter than America? I don't think so.
Well,
mostly parliamentary. I mean, there's literal reasons, right? We don't have a parliamentary system.
I mean,
we also have a First Amendment. We don't make people campaign this whole time. The American people want to give them $20, and so they can afford it. I mean, small dollar donors are arguably the worst thing that's happened to our politics, as it turned out.
It's a small dollar donor didn't make $20 billion. No.
A lot of it.
Look, Kamala Harris started out with some momentum. She had the spotlight, the media hype, and the historic first narrative working in her favor. But here's the problem. Her party's obsession with woke politics smothered any chance she had of connecting with everyday Americans. The messaging wasn't inspiring, it was exhausting. People struggling to fill their gas tanks and put food on the table weren't interested in lectures about pronouns and privilege. That's why voters didn't trust Kamala to lead. Not because she's a woman, not because she's a woman of color, but because she became the mascot of everything they were tired of. Meanwhile, Trump, love him or hate him, was out there talking about a stronger economy, lower inflation, and fewer culture war distractions. He was blunt, relatable, and for many, a safer bet than Kamala's vague slogans and nervous laughter. In the end, the choice wasn't complicated. For voters, it felt like survival.